The year is 1893, and Chicago is bustling with life. The city, hosting the Grand World's Columbian Exposition, attracts millions with promises of wonder, innovation, and progress. Beneath the excitement lies a chilling secret: a man operating in the shadows, preying on the hopes and vulnerabilities of those drawn to this beacon of modernity. His name was H. Holmes, and his story remains one of the most terrifying chapters in American history. H. Holmes is often remembered as America's first documented serial killer, a man whose crimes were as cunning as they were horrifying. He didn't just murder, he orchestrated a sinister operation. At the center of his deeds stood his infamous murder castle, a building disguised as a hotel but designed with a far darker purpose. Behind its walls were soundproof rooms, secret passageways, and hidden chutes leading to a basement that concealed Holmes's true intentions. But what drove Holmes to create such a nightmare? How did a man born in a small New Hampshire town rise to infamy as a master manipulator, con artist, and killer? His charm was his weapon, his intelligence his armor, and his victims, often young women seeking better lives, were his prey. The late 19th century was a time of progress, but it also harbored dangers. Rapid urbanization, anonymous crowds, and the allure of new opportunities created an environment where someone like Holmes could operate unnoticed. He used this to his advantage, crafting a persona of success and respectability to mask his crimes. This documentary will take you on a journey through Holmes's life and the terrifying events surrounding him. We will uncover his childhood, marked by early signs of a calculating mind, and his rise to infamy as a man who wielded both charm and cruelty. You'll see how he used deceit to construct his deadly castle, lured unsuspecting victims, and evaded suspicion in a society unprepared for someone of his cunning. Holmes's story is more than a tale of murder. It's a chilling reminder of how ambition, intelligence, and evil can intersect. His crimes reveal the vulnerabilities of human trust and the dangers of unchecked power. As we begin, consider this: what allowed Holmes to succeed in his horrifying endeavors? Was it his brilliance, the ignorance of the era, or a combination of both? Stay with us as we delve into a narrative of terror, manipulation, and the unrelenting pursuit of power. A story that continues to captivate and horrify over a century later. Holmes wasn't just a man, he was a symbol of the darkness that can hide behind even the most convincing facade. Herman Webster Mudgett, later known as H. Holmes, was born on May 16, 1861, in the small, rural town of Gilmanton, New Hampshire. His upbringing was shaped by a strict and disciplined household. His parents, Levi Horton Mudgett and Theodate Page Price, were devout Methodists who enforced their moral values with rigid authority. This stern environment left little room for affection or emotional connection, fostering a sense of isolation in young Herman. The quiet, insular nature of Gilmanton offered few opportunities for socialization, and he spent much of his childhood immersed in books and solitary pursuits. From an early age, Herman showed signs of being unusually intelligent, often outshining his peers in school. However, this intelligence came at a cost, as it set him apart and made him a target for bullying. The ridicule he endured, combined with his already solitary disposition, pushed him further into a world of his own making. One particular incident during his childhood marked a turning point in his life. Bullies forced him to confront a skeleton in a local doctor's office, an experience that initially terrified him. Yet, instead of leaving him traumatized, it ignited a dark fascination with anatomy and death. This moment, Holmes would later claim, sparked his lifelong interest in medicine, though it also hinted at a deeper, more troubling curiosity. As he grew older, Herman's fascination with anatomy took a darker turn. He was rumored to conduct experiments on animals, a behavior that alarmed those around him but failed to draw serious scrutiny. Despite these troubling signs, he excelled academically, particularly in science, which provided an outlet for his curiosity. At the age of 17, he married Clara Lovering, with whom he had a son, Robert. However, the responsibilities of marriage and fatherhood clashed with his growing ambitions. His marriage quickly deteriorated, and Herman abandoned his young family to pursue a medical education. Herman enrolled at the University of Vermont but soon transferred to the University of Michigan's Department of Medicine and Surgery, where he graduated in 1884. During his time there, he developed a reputation for being both meticulous and opportunistic. He worked in anatomy labs, where he honed his skills in dissection. However, it was also during this period that his darker tendencies began to surface more prominently. Holmes was accused of stealing cadavers from the university, which he allegedly used in elaborate insurance fraud schemes. He would mutilate the bodies to make their identities unrecognizable, then collect life insurance payouts by claiming they were victims of tragic accidents. Holmes's time in medical school revealed an unsettling duality in his character. While he appeared to be a dedicated and capable student, he was also laying the groundwork for the deceptive practices that would define his criminal career. His charm and charisma allowed him to manipulate those around him, leaving behind a trail of unpaid debts and broken relationships. He seemed to possess an uncanny ability to reinvent himself, adapting to new environments with ease and creating a facade of trustworthiness and professionalism. After graduating, Holmes drifted from one job to another, often fleeing towns to escape creditors or disgruntled employers. By the time he arrived in Chicago in 1886, he had adopted the name Dr. H. Holmes, a moniker that lent him an air of respectability and helped him gain a foothold in the bustling city. Chicago, with its rapid industrial growth and booming population, was a place of endless opportunities, and for Holmes, it was a stage on which he could execute his most sinister plans. Holmes's early life was a study in contradictions. Beneath the surface of a promising young man with intelligence and ambition lurked a darker nature, one that was slowly beginning to emerge. The strict discipline of his childhood, his fascination with anatomy and death, and his ability to manipulate and deceive all converged to shape the man who would later become one of America's most notorious figures. His arrival in Chicago marked the beginning of his transformation from a cunning manipulator to a calculated predator. What had been isolated incidents of deception and fraud would soon escalate into a horrifying legacy of murder and infamy. In the late 1880s, H. Holmes arrived in Chicago, a city brimming with energy and opportunity. The rapidly expanding metropolis, fueled by industrialization and preparing for the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, offered Holmes the perfect environment to build his new identity. Presenting himself as a well-educated and respectable doctor, Holmes quickly ingratiated himself into the community. His charm and polished demeanor masked a calculated mind already planning his rise to power and wealth, no matter the cost. Holmes initially found work at a local pharmacy, where he impressed the owners with his intelligence and work ethic. His charisma drew in customers, and he quickly gained their trust. However, Holmes's true nature soon surfaced. He manipulated the elderly owner of the pharmacy into signing over the business under suspicious circumstances, and shortly after, the man disappeared under mysterious conditions. Holmes claimed the owner had decided to retire elsewhere, but rumors of foul play began to circulate. Despite these whispers, Holmes retained control of the pharmacy and used it as a stepping stone for his next venture. Across the street from the pharmacy, Holmes began constructing a three-story building that would later be infamously known as the Murder Castle. The building was ostensibly designed as a mixed-use property, with retail spaces on the ground floor and apartments above. Holmes was meticulous in his plans, hiring and firing multiple contractors to ensure no one person had a complete understanding of the building's layout. The result was a labyrinthine structure filled with hidden rooms, secret passageways, and soundproof chambers. Some rooms were equipped with gas lines that Holmes could control remotely, while others had trapdoors leading to the basement, where he installed vats of acid, a crematorium, and other macabre tools for disposing of bodies. Holmes's charm and the promise of the upcoming World's Fair allowed him to attract tenants and employees to his building. Young women, in particular, were drawn to his polished demeanor and the opportunities he offered. Many of them, seeking independence in the bustling city, rented rooms in the building or took jobs working for Holmes. Tragically, for many of these women, this decision would prove fatal. As the World's Columbian Exposition drew nearer, Chicago became a magnet for visitors and job seekers from across the country. Holmes took full advantage of this influx, targeting vulnerable individuals who had few connections in the city. His victims often included women who were lured by his charm and promises of marriage or employment. Once under his control, these women would mysteriously vanish. Holmes's ability to manipulate those around him ensured that these disappearances went largely unnoticed. At the same time, Holmes expanded his fraudulent activities. He established various business ventures, many of which existed solely to swindle investors and creditors. Holmes used his murder castle as a base for these schemes, hiding incriminating evidence in its maze-like structure. His most audacious scam involved selling skeletons to medical schools. Holmes would murder his victims, strip their bodies of flesh, and articulate their skeletons to sell to unsuspecting buyers. This gruesome trade was lucrative and capitalized on his medical knowledge and connections. Despite the mounting disappearances and his growing network of scams, Holmes managed to avoid suspicion for years. His charm and intelligence made him appear trustworthy, while the chaotic nature of Chicago during this period provided cover for his crimes. Holmes's ability to compartmentalize his life was key to his success. To the outside world, he was a successful businessman and doctor, while behind closed doors, he was orchestrating one of the most horrifying killing sprees in American history. Holmes's rise to prominence culminated during the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition. The fair brought millions of visitors to Chicago, many of whom needed temporary lodging. Holmes marketed his murder castle as a hotel, specifically targeting out-of-town visitors who were unlikely to be missed if they disappeared. The fair provided Holmes with an endless supply of victims, and the chaotic atmosphere made it easy for him to cover his tracks. As his operations expanded, Holmes began to make mistakes. His insatiable greed led him to defraud even his closest associates, including his business partner, Benjamin Pitezel. Pitezel, a family man with a wife and children, was deeply entangled in Holmes's schemes. Holmes manipulated Pitezel into faking his own death as part of an insurance scam. However, Holmes had no intention of sharing the profits. Instead, he murdered Pitezel and subsequently targeted Pitezel's children, eliminating them to tie up loose ends. The Pitezel murders marked a turning point in Holmes's life. While his crimes up to this point had gone largely unnoticed, his increasingly reckless behavior began to draw attention. The insurance company investigating Pitezel's death became suspicious, and a former associate of Holmes provided crucial information to authorities. Holmes's web of lies and deceit was finally beginning to unravel. During this period, Holmes continued to operate with an air of confidence, believing himself to be untouchable. However, the walls were closing in. Investigators began piecing together the connections between the disappearances, the fraudulent schemes, and the eerie activities at the murder castle. What had once seemed like the success of a shrewd businessman was now being revealed as the horrifying legacy of a calculated killer. Holmes's rise to prominence was marked by a chilling combination of charm, intelligence, and ruthlessness. He exploited the opportunities of a rapidly changing society, using the chaos and anonymity of urban life to commit crimes on an unprecedented scale. The murder castle stood as a grim testament to his ingenuity and depravity, a place where ambition and evil merged in a way that shocked the nation. As Holmes's empire began to crumble, the true extent of his crimes was only just coming to light. Holmes's life was marked by a series of events and conflicts that unveiled the darkest aspects of human cunning and cruelty. Known as America's first documented serial killer, Holmes orchestrated a chilling sequence of crimes during the late 19th century, culminating in the infamous murder castle and a fraudulent trail of deceit that shook the nation. This period of his life, defined by his meticulous schemes and shocking murders, reflects not only his personal depravity but also the vulnerabilities of an era defined by rapid urbanization and limited law enforcement coordination. The construction of the murder castle was one of the most chilling achievements of Holmes's criminal career. Located in Chicago's Englewood neighborhood, the three-story building initially appeared to be an unremarkable mixed-use property, housing retail spaces, offices, and residential apartments. However, behind its facade lay a structure meticulously designed to serve Holmes's sinister purposes. Holmes exploited his charm and intelligence to manipulate architects and contractors, frequently firing workers and refusing payment to ensure that no single person could fully comprehend the building's layout. The result was a nightmarish labyrinth filled with soundproof rooms, hidden passages, and secret compartments. Some rooms were fitted with gas lines, enabling Holmes to asphyxiate victims at will, while others led to chutes that deposited bodies directly into the basement. The basement itself was a macabre workshop, equipped with vats of acid, quicklime pits, a crematorium, and surgical tools for dissecting and disposing of corpses. The timing of the murder castle's completion aligned perfectly with the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, a grand event that drew millions of visitors to Chicago. This international fair celebrated the achievements of modern industry, science, and art, but for Holmes, it provided an unprecedented opportunity to lure unsuspecting victims. Holmes advertised his castle as a hotel for fairgoers, particularly targeting women traveling alone. Many of these women were seeking work or new opportunities in the bustling city, making them ideal targets for Holmes's manipulative charm. Once inside the building, they became ensnared in his web of lies and deceit, often disappearing without a trace. Holmes's ability to operate undetected amidst the chaos of the fair highlighted the lack of coordination between local and national law enforcement agencies at the time. Holmes's victims were not limited to fairgoers. He also preyed on those in his personal and professional circles. One of his earliest known victims was Julia Smythe, a woman who became romantically involved with Holmes while her husband worked for him. Julia and her daughter Pearl disappeared suddenly, with Holmes later claiming that Julia had died during an abortion procedure he performed, though no evidence of this explanation was ever verified. Similarly, Emmeline Sigrand, a young woman employed by Holmes, vanished after he convinced her to sign over her life savings and marry him. These cases illustrate Holmes's ability to exploit trust and manipulate those closest to him. Holmes's criminal activities extended beyond murder to an intricate web of fraud and deception. He engaged in various schemes to swindle money from businesses, investors, and individuals. One of his most infamous cons involved a business partner named Benjamin Pitezel. Holmes convinced Pitezel to participate in a life insurance scam in which Pitezel would fake his death, allowing them to collect a substantial payout. However, Holmes had no intention of sharing the money. Instead, he murdered Pitezel, staging his death as a laboratory explosion. To cover his tracks, Holmes manipulated Pitezel's widow, Carrie, and her children, leading them on a cross-country journey under false pretenses while systematically eliminating witnesses to his crimes. The murders of Pitezel's children were among the most horrifying aspects of Holmes's spree. Holmes promised Carrie that he would reunite her with her children, but instead used his charm and persuasion to separate them from her. Alice, Nellie, and Howard Pitezel were taken to different locations, where Holmes ultimately killed them in brutal and calculated ways. He locked Alice and Nellie in a trunk, sealing their fate by asphyxiation with gas, and later buried their bodies in shallow graves. Howard's death was equally gruesome, involving dismemberment in a rented house. These murders underscored Holmes's complete lack of empathy and his willingness to destroy entire families to achieve his goals. As Holmes's schemes grew more elaborate, so did the risks. His fraudulent activities began to attract attention, particularly from insurance companies and law enforcement. One of his former associates, Marion Hedgepeth, whom Holmes had promised a share of the insurance scam proceeds, provided a critical tip to authorities after feeling betrayed. This led investigators to scrutinize Holmes's actions, uncovering inconsistencies and suspicious patterns in his dealings. Holmes's arrest in Boston in 1894, initially for horse theft, marked the beginning of the unraveling of his carefully constructed facade. The investigation into Holmes's activities revealed a trail of death and deception stretching across multiple states. Authorities were shocked to discover the true purpose of the murder castle, with its hidden compartments and death traps. The public was equally horrified as newspapers sensationalized the findings, dubbing Holmes the Beast of Chicago. The extent of his crimes was difficult to quantify, as many of his victims were never identified, and Holmes himself provided contradictory accounts of his actions. Holmes's trial was a spectacle that captivated the nation. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Holmes maintained his innocence and attempted to manipulate the proceedings with his characteristic charm. However, the testimonies of witnesses, combined with the physical evidence discovered in the murder castle and elsewhere, left little doubt about his guilt. He was convicted of the murder of Benjamin Pitezel and sentenced to death, though it was widely believed that he was responsible for many more deaths. While awaiting execution, Holmes wrote a memoir in which he alternated between confessing to and denying various crimes. His accounts were often self-serving and inconsistent, reflecting his lifelong tendency to manipulate the truth to suit his narrative. Holmes was hanged on May 7, 1896, in Philadelphia, bringing an end to his reign of terror. His death did little to quell public fascination with his crimes, which continued to be the subject of books, articles, and speculation for decades. The major events and conflicts in Holmes's life reveal a man who exploited the vulnerabilities of his time with chilling efficiency. His ability to blend charm, intelligence, and ruthlessness allowed him to operate undetected for years, leaving a trail of victims in his wake. The discovery of his crimes not only shocked the nation but also highlighted the need for improved law enforcement practices and interagency communication. Holmes's legacy as one of history's most infamous criminals serves as a grim reminder of the depths of human depravity and the importance of vigilance in the face of evil. The climax of H. Holmes's dark saga unfolds during the final years of his criminal career, as his meticulously crafted web of lies begins to collapse under the weight of mounting evidence, betrayal, and law enforcement scrutiny. By the time Holmes was arrested in 1894, his reign of terror had already left an indelible mark on history. The events leading to his downfall, the chilling revelations about his crimes, and the dramatic culmination of his trial represent the most pivotal and haunting moments of his life. This phase not only brought Holmes to justice but also exposed the horrifying depths of his cruelty. Holmes's arrest in Boston was a critical turning point. Initially apprehended for a relatively minor charge of horse theft, law enforcement officers quickly discovered that Holmes was entangled in far more sinister activities. Investigators had been tipped off by Marion Hedgepeth, a former accomplice of Holmes who felt betrayed after being denied his promised share of an insurance scam. Hedgepeth's information provided the impetus for a deeper investigation into Holmes's life, leading authorities to connect him to a series of fraudulent schemes and suspicious disappearances. Once in custody, Holmes's carefully maintained facade of respectability began to crumble. One of the most significant breakthroughs came with the discovery of the Pitezel family murders. Holmes's plan to defraud an insurance company by faking the death of Benjamin Pitezel had taken a dark turn when Holmes decided to murder Pitezel outright, staging his death as a laboratory accident. Holmes then manipulated Carrie Pitezel, Benjamin's widow, convincing her that he would reunite her with her children while systematically killing them to cover his tracks. The gruesome deaths of Alice, Nellie, and Howard Pitezel shocked even seasoned investigators, who were unprepared for the sheer brutality and calculated nature of Holmes's actions. These murders, more than any others, sealed Holmes's reputation as a monster. As investigators pieced together the evidence, the full scale of Holmes's crimes became apparent. His infamous murder castle was revealed to be a nightmarish sight of torture and death, its labyrinthine design making it nearly impossible for victims to escape. When authorities searched the building, they discovered rooms outfitted with gas lines, soundproof walls, and hidden chutes leading to the basement, where Holmes disposed of his victims' bodies using acid, quicklime, and a crematorium. The chilling discovery of human remains in various stages of decomposition left no doubt about the building's true purpose. The public was both horrified and fascinated by the revelations. Newspapers across the country published sensationalized accounts of Holmes's crimes, dubbing him the Beast of Chicago and speculating about the number of victims he had claimed. Estimates ranged from 27 to over 200, though the true number remains unknown due to the lack of comprehensive records and Holmes's own contradictory confessions. The attention surrounding the case turned Holmes into a macabre celebrity, his name synonymous with the worst aspects of human nature. Holmes's trial in 1895 was a spectacle that captured national attention. Charged with the murder of Benjamin Pitezel, Holmes faced overwhelming evidence against him, including witness testimonies, forensic findings, and his own fraudulent dealings. Despite this, Holmes attempted to manipulate the proceedings with his characteristic charm and intelligence. Acting as his own attorney for part of the trial, he delivered elaborate speeches and cross-examinations, attempting to cast doubt on the prosecution's case. However, his efforts were ultimately futile, as the sheer weight of the evidence left little room for doubt about his guilt. The testimonies of witnesses were particularly damning. Members of law enforcement, former employees, and individuals who had been conned by Holmes provided detailed accounts of his actions, painting a picture of a man driven by greed, manipulation, and an insatiable appetite for control. The most emotional moments came from the Pitezel family, whose harrowing losses served as a stark reminder of the human cost of Holmes's crimes. The prosecution's strategy of focusing on the Pitezel murders proved effective, as it allowed them to present a clear and compelling case without becoming bogged down in the complexities of Holmes's other alleged crimes. Holmes's behavior during the trial further alienated the jury and the public. His attempts to charm the courtroom often came across as callous and self-serving, particularly when contrasted with the gravity of the charges against him. At times, he appeared to revel in the attention, offering contradictory confessions and even claiming to have killed over 100 people, though these statements were largely dismissed as attempts to sensationalize his story. Holmes's lack of remorse and his refusal to take responsibility for his actions cemented his image as a cold and calculating killer. The jury deliberated for only a short time before finding Holmes guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Benjamin Pitezel. He was sentenced to death by hanging, a punishment that reflected the severity of his crimes. Following his conviction, Holmes was transferred to Moyamensing Prison in Philadelphia, where he awaited execution. While in prison, Holmes wrote a memoir in which he alternately confessed to and denied various crimes, further muddying the waters of his legacy. His writings, filled with self-serving justifications and contradictions, offered little insight into his true motivations but revealed a man consumed by his own myth. Holmes's execution on May 7, 1896, marked the end of one of the darkest chapters in American criminal history. On the day of his hanging, Holmes maintained his composure, reportedly showing no fear as he faced the gallows. His last words were a final act of defiance, claiming that his conscience was clear and expressing no remorse for his actions. The hanging itself was gruesome, with reports indicating that Holmes's neck did not break instantly, leading to a prolonged and painful death. For many, this was seen as a fitting end for a man who had caused so much suffering. The aftermath of Holmes's crimes left a lasting impact on American society. His case highlighted significant weaknesses in law enforcement and the judicial system, particularly the lack of coordination between agencies and the challenges of tracking criminals across state lines. In response, efforts were made to improve investigative techniques and establish more robust communication networks, paving the way for modern criminal justice practices. Holmes's story also served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the darker side of human ingenuity. Despite his death, Holmes's legacy continued to haunt the public imagination. His crimes became the subject of countless books, articles, and films, ensuring that his name remained synonymous with evil. The murder castle itself became a symbol of his depravity, though the building was eventually demolished in the early 20th century. Today, Holmes is remembered as one of history's most infamous serial killers, his story a chilling reminder of the depths of human cruelty. The resolution of H.H. Holmes's story provides a haunting closure to a life of unparalleled deception, cruelty, and murder. With his execution in 1896, Holmes met his grim fate, but the ramifications of his crimes continued to unfold, leaving a legacy that forced society to confront its vulnerabilities and implement changes in law enforcement and criminal justice. The decline of Holmes's influence and the aftermath of his actions shed light on the profound impact of his reign of terror. Following Holmes's conviction and subsequent execution, the story of his atrocities remained a focus of national attention. The media frenzy surrounding his trial and crimes had sensationalized every aspect of his life, but in the weeks after his death, a mixture of relief and horror permeated the public consciousness. For those directly affected by Holmes's actions, his execution provided a semblance of justice. Families of the victims, such as the Pittizels, could only take solace in knowing that the man responsible for their suffering had paid the ultimate price. However, the ripple effects of Holmes's crimes extended far beyond the courtroom and the gallows. The murder castle, the center of his gruesome activities, became a symbol of human depravity. In the months following his execution, curious onlookers and journalists descended upon the building, eager to see the infamous sight. Some sought morbid fascination, while others aimed to understand how such horrors had been concealed in plain sight for so long. The discovery of trapdoors, secret passages, soundproof rooms, and body disposal mechanisms stunned investigators and the public alike, serving as physical evidence of Holmes's calculated cruelty. Attempts were made to capitalize on the public's morbid curiosity. Some enterprising individuals proposed turning the murder castle into a macabre tourist attraction. However, these plans were short-lived. A mysterious fire broke out in the building in 1895, just months before Holmes's execution. While the fire caused significant damage, it did not entirely destroy the structure. The cause of the fire remains unknown, with some speculating that it was an act of arson, either by individuals trying to erase the gruesome history or by Holmes's own associates attempting to conceal further evidence of crimes. Eventually, the murder castle was demolished, erasing its physical presence but not its psychological impact. In its place, a post office was constructed, a mundane structure intended to overwrite the site's dark past. Yet, the ghost of the murder castle lingered in the collective memory of Chicago, a grim reminder of the city's brush with pure evil. Holmes's death also prompted serious reflection within law enforcement agencies across the United States. His ability to evade capture for so long, despite committing fraud, theft, and multiple murders, exposed significant flaws in policing at the time. Law enforcement struggled with the lack of centralized criminal databases and poor communication between jurisdictions, which had allowed Holmes to move freely and commit crimes across state lines. His case became a catalyst for reform, leading to the eventual development of more coordinated policing efforts and the establishment of organizations like the FBI, which would specialize in tracking and apprehending criminals with multi-state operations. The sensational nature of Holmes's crimes also contributed to advances in forensic science and investigative techniques. During his trial, investigators relied heavily on physical evidence such as human remains found in the murder castle. This underscored the importance of forensic analysis in solving complex cases. In subsequent years, the techniques used in the Holmes investigation were refined and expanded, becoming standard practices in the pursuit of justice. The cultural impact of Holmes's story was equally significant. His crimes marked a turning point in the public's understanding of serial killers, a term not yet coined during his lifetime. Holmes was often viewed as an aberration, an anomaly in a society that struggled to comprehend the scale of his evil. Yet, his actions foreshadowed a grim reality: the existence of others like him, capable of exploiting society's blind spots for their gain. His case prompted a deeper examination of the psychological and sociological factors that drive such behavior, laying the groundwork for future studies in criminal psychology. Holmes's notoriety persisted long after his death. His life became the subject of countless books, articles, and eventually films, often sensationalized to heighten the drama of his already horrific crimes. Writers and filmmakers depicted Holmes as a diabolical mastermind, a larger-than-life villain whose charm masked his inner darkness. While these portrayals sometimes exaggerated the details, they ensured that Holmes's story would remain etched in history as a cautionary tale. For the families of Holmes's victims, the end of his life brought no real closure. The scars left by his actions could not be healed by his execution. The Pitzel family, in particular, suffered immensely, losing not only Benjamin but also 3 of the children who had trusted Holmes. Carrie Pitzel, the grieving widow, lived with the trauma of her family's betrayal and destruction. For her and others affected, Holmes's death was merely a symbolic end to a nightmare that could never truly be forgotten. As time passed, Holmes's story became intertwined with the mythos of Chicago itself. The city, rapidly modernizing and expanding in the wake of the 1893 World's Fair, struggled to reconcile its image as a hub of innovation and progress with the dark reality of the murder castle. Holmes's crimes cast a long shadow over the city, a reminder of the vulnerabilities that accompanied rapid urbanization. The anonymity of city life, which had allowed Holmes to operate unnoticed for so long, became a point of reflection for urban planners and sociologists alike. In the decades following Holmes's death, interest in his crimes periodically resurfaced, particularly during anniversaries or as new theories emerged about the extent of his atrocities. Some speculated that Holmes might have been responsible for additional murders, possibly even those attributed to Jack the Ripper, though these claims lack substantial evidence. The enduring fascination with Holmes underscores humanity's need to understand and process the unthinkable. Ultimately, the resolution of H.H. Holmes's story lies not in his death, but in the lessons learned from his actions. His life of crime revealed critical vulnerabilities in the legal and social systems of the time, prompting reforms that have shaped modern law enforcement and forensic science. At the same time, his story serves as a grim reminder of the capacity for human evil, a chilling tale that continues to captivate and horrify generations. The decline of H.H. Holmes marked the end of one man's terror, but its echoes remain a part of history, ensuring that his name will not be forgotten, even as society strives to prevent such horrors from ever occurring again. The legacy of H.H. Holmes is a chilling testament to the extremes of human malevolence and cunning. Even more than a century after his death, Holmes remains a figure of fascination, symbolizing both the darkest capabilities of the human mind and the vulnerabilities of a society ill-prepared for such unprecedented evil. His story, though horrifying, has left an indelible mark on criminal justice, urban culture, and collective memory. Holmes's impact on the criminal justice system cannot be overstated. His ability to operate undetected for years, committing crimes of fraud, theft, and murder across multiple states, revealed significant gaps in law enforcement during the late 19th century. Local police forces, often working in isolation, struggled to track a criminal as mobile and resourceful as Holmes. The decentralized nature of law enforcement allowed him to exploit jurisdictional boundaries, evading capture while his crimes escalated in scale and brutality. In response to such cases, the need for more unified and efficient policing became apparent. Holmes's crimes indirectly contributed to the development of centralized databases and interstate cooperation, foundational elements of modern policing. The sensational nature of Holmes's trial and the subsequent discovery of the murder castle also highlighted the need for advancements in forensic science. Investigators were unprepared for the grisly evidence they uncovered, relying primarily on rudimentary methods to analyze the remains of Holmes's victims. This case underscored the importance of developing more sophisticated techniques for crime scene investigation and evidence preservation. Over time, forensic science evolved, becoming an essential tool in solving crimes of this magnitude. Holmes's actions, though horrifying, inadvertently accelerated the professionalization of forensic practices and criminal profiling. The cultural ramifications of Holmes's crimes are equally significant. He is often regarded as one of America's first documented serial killers, and his story has shaped public perceptions of this criminal archetype. Before Holmes, the concept of a serial killer was largely unknown, and his calculated methods of luring victims, combined with his charismatic facade, became the blueprint for understanding this phenomenon. His actions forced society to grapple with the unsettling truth that evil can wear a charming disguise, hiding in plain sight. This realization not only influenced popular culture but also changed how communities approached safety and trust in an increasingly urbanized world. Holmes's crimes occurred during a transformative period in American history, when cities were rapidly expanding and anonymity was becoming a feature of urban life. The Murder Castle, strategically located near the site of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, epitomized the darker side of urbanization. The fair, meant to showcase innovation and progress, unwittingly became the backdrop for Holmes's atrocities. His ability to exploit the bustling, impersonal environment of Chicago at the time revealed the risks associated with such rapid urban growth. This realization prompted discussions about urban planning, public safety, and the responsibilities of communities in preventing crime. The Murder Castle itself became a symbol of horror and intrigue, its story capturing the imagination of the public long after its destruction. Holmes had designed the building with an almost theatrical cruelty, incorporating hidden chambers, soundproof rooms, and secret passageways to facilitate his crimes. While the building was eventually demolished, its legacy as a site of unimaginable horror endured. Over the years, the story of the Murder Castle has been retold and reimagined in countless books, films, and television series, often blurring the lines between fact and fiction. This sensationalism has contributed to Holmes's enduring infamy, cementing his place in the annals of true crime history. Holmes's story also had a profound impact on popular culture. From early 20th century crime novels to contemporary media, his life and crimes have been dramatized, fictionalized, and analyzed from every angle. Erik Larson's The Devil in the White City is perhaps the most notable modern retelling, weaving Holmes's story into the broader narrative of the Chicago World's Fair. This book not only renewed interest in Holmes but also highlighted the stark contrast between the fair's promise of progress and the horrors lurking in its shadow. Film and television adaptations, inspired by Larson's work and other accounts, have further solidified Holmes's place in the cultural imagination, often portraying him as a symbol of unchecked ambition and moral decay. Despite the sensationalism, Holmes's story serves as a cautionary tale about the human capacity for deception and cruelty. His ability to manipulate those around him, whether through charm, lies, or fear, underscores the importance of vigilance and skepticism in interpersonal relationships. Holmes's crimes remind society of the need to balance trust with caution, especially in an increasingly interconnected world. For those directly affected by Holmes's actions, his legacy is one of pain and loss. The families of his victims, such as the Pitezel family, bore the brunt of his cruelty, their lives forever altered by his actions. For them, Holmes's execution was not enough to erase the trauma he inflicted. Their suffering became a poignant reminder of the devastating human cost of his crimes, adding a layer of tragedy to his already horrific story. Holmes's legacy also includes the ethical and psychological questions his case raises. What drove a man to such extremes of cruelty? How could someone so outwardly successful and intelligent commit such heinous acts without remorse? These questions have fueled debates among criminologists, psychologists, and historians, many of whom view Holmes as a case study in psychopathy and moral disengagement. His crimes provide insight into the minds of those who commit atrocities, helping to inform strategies for prevention and intervention. In the broader context of American history, Holmes's story reflects the duality of the Gilded Age, a time of remarkable progress and innovation, but also of stark inequality and hidden dangers. While industrialization and urbanization brought unprecedented opportunities, they also created conditions in which individuals like Holmes could thrive. His ability to exploit these conditions serves as a reminder of the need for vigilance in addressing the unintended consequences of societal change. Ultimately, the legacy of H. Holmes is both a reflection of his time and a warning for the future. His crimes exposed vulnerabilities in law enforcement, urban planning, and human psychology, prompting changes that have shaped the modern world. At the same time, his story continues to captivate and horrify, a testament to the enduring power of true crime to shed light on the darkest corners of humanity. As society continues to grapple with the implications of his actions, Holmes remains a figure of macabre fascination, a reminder of the thin line between civilization and chaos. The story of H. Holmes, often dubbed America's first serial killer, stands as a chilling reminder of the depths to which human depravity can reach. His life, marked by ambition, deception, and unspeakable acts of violence, has fascinated and horrified people for over a century. As a man who blended charm with malevolence, Holmes personified the dangers of unchecked ambition and moral indifference, creating a legacy that continues to reverberate in discussions on criminal psychology, law enforcement, and the nature of evil itself. At the heart of Holmes's story lies a profound paradox: a man capable of great cunning and intellect who nonetheless chose to use his talents for destruction. His ability to build a facade of respectability, even while orchestrating unimaginable horrors, shocked both his contemporaries and modern audiences. The notion that someone so outwardly successful could harbor such dark secrets challenges our understanding of the nature of evil and deception. Holmes's case forced society to confront uncomfortable truths about the ease with which a predator can blend into everyday life, and how the rapid industrialization and urbanization of America created an environment ripe for exploitation. The impact of Holmes's crimes rippled far beyond the immediate victims and their families. His ability to evade capture for so long highlighted significant flaws in the criminal justice system of the late 19th century. It exposed the challenges of early law enforcement practices, especially in an era where technology and coordinated efforts between jurisdictions were in their infancy. The lessons learned from Holmes's ability to move undetected across state lines, committing fraud and murder without leaving a clear trail, contributed to the eventual evolution of more sophisticated law enforcement methods and interstate cooperation. In this way, Holmes's crimes unintentionally accelerated the professionalization of criminal justice, influencing how authorities would approach similar cases in the future. Furthermore, Holmes's actions also had a profound effect on the development of forensic science. The grisly details of the murder castle and the investigation that followed revealed the need for more refined techniques in crime scene analysis and victim identification. Though forensic science was still in its infancy during Holmes's time, the public and legal response to his crimes emphasized the importance of evidence-based investigations and solidified the role of science in the courtroom. Today, many of the principles of forensic science that were developed in response to Holmes's crimes continue to be foundational in solving complex criminal cases. On a cultural level, Holmes's legacy endures as one of the most infamous figures in American criminal history. His story has been sensationalized in countless books, documentaries, and films, creating an almost mythological figure that continues to capture the public's imagination. Works like Erik Larson's The Devil in the White City have reintroduced his case to modern audiences, blending the horror of his crimes with the grandeur of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, emphasizing the stark contrast between the progress symbolized by the fair and the darkness lurking just beneath the surface. This blending of fact and fiction has only solidified Holmes's place in popular culture, reinforcing the notion that evil can often be hidden behind a mask of civility. While much of the fascination surrounding Holmes is driven by his horrific actions, his legacy also serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and manipulation. The extent to which he manipulated those around him, from business partners to victims, highlights the destructive power of deceit and ambition when combined with a complete lack of empathy. His ability to convince others of his trustworthiness while orchestrating horrific crimes exposes the fragility of human judgment and the ease with which people can be misled by appearances. Yet, despite the sensationalism and the grisly nature of his story, there remains an enduring sense of tragedy for the victims of Holmes. The families whose lives were upended by his crimes, particularly the Pitzel family, were left with a void that no punishment could truly fill. Their suffering is a somber reminder of the human cost of his actions. For them, Holmes's execution was not enough to erase the pain caused by his systematic destruction of their loved ones, further underscoring the emotional devastation that accompanies such horrific crimes. The legacy of H. Holmes is also a reminder of the broader societal challenges of the Gilded Age, a period of rapid industrial growth, urbanization, and inequality. As cities grew, so too did the anonymity of urban life, allowing individuals like Holmes to hide in plain sight. His story is inseparable from the social conditions of the time, highlighting how the very forces that fostered innovation and progress also created an environment where crime could flourish. His ability to exploit these conditions raises important questions about the balance between progress and safety in a rapidly changing society. In conclusion, H. Holmes's story is more than a tale of crime. It is a profound examination of the darkness that can exist within human nature and the structures of society that can enable such evil. His life and crimes have left a lasting imprint on criminal history, law enforcement, and popular culture, shaping the way we understand both criminal behavior and the potential for harm within urban environments. Though the murder castle was destroyed and Holmes himself was executed, the eerie legacy of his crimes continues to haunt the public consciousness, serving as a grim reminder of the depths to which a human soul can descend when driven by ambition, greed, and a total disregard for human life.